So although mental health remains a taboo subject, recently sports stars like Naomi Osaka, Simone, Biles and Sloane have shared openly their experiences. COVID-19 brought with it bio bubbles, quarantine and missing crowds, which have affected players as well. Sports psychologist Dr. Kirsten van Heerden joins us now via Zoom to expand on that subject. Now, Doc, thank you so much for your time, and I want to get straight into it. Since the beginning of COVID-19, we've talked about how the absence of crowds affect players. They sort of feed off the crowds at times. But tomorrow in the Rugby Championship, we're going to see the Springboks face Australia in front of a crowd for the first time since the Rugby World Cup. As you know, we had a very hard lockdown in our country, so we haven't had any spectators since March 2020. How does this very quick switch affect the psyche of an athlete?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for asking me to be on the show and talk about this really important issue within sport. And I think, as you say, it's the nature of the changes that have happened and the uncertainty that have really got to athletes. You know, no crowds, and then, back into lockdown and then not lockdown. And so it does, it's hard. Athletes are generally around trying to, control their controllables and be in control of the situation. And of course, with COVID, so much has been out of control. But I would say that for example, with the rugby, they really do just have to focus on playing. It's just made that much more difficult in these uncertain times.
Whilst mental health very recently has been a subject matter in sport quite often, the silence around mental health issues in South Africa is actually deafening. And I think it's twofold. Of course, the stigma around it, and some people just genuinely don't understand what's happening with their feelings. So how did we get to the point where athletes feel more comfortable to open up? In South Africa, specifically in the recent years, the likes of former rugby player Robbie Kempson, and we've seen also a rower Leanne Purse, they've actually shared their stories quite openly.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to see that some of them are coming out. And I think, as you said, it's still the stigma that's attached to it. And I think that is, around the world, it's wonderful to see active athletes, not just retired athletes. For example, Michael Phelps was also quite open about his battles with mental health, but it was really once he had retired. So it's wonderful to see athletes that are still active talking about it. And in South Africa, we do still have a long way to go. And it certainly is linked very much to this idea of mental health issues being weakness, and particularly as an athlete as well. You certainly don't want to admit to kind of any weakness. So I applaud like Robbie and Lee that are speaking out, and I know when they have, the support has been overwhelming. And if anything, if I can get a message out there to anyone, is that when you do actually share your story, majority of times, as I say, people are incredibly supportive and identify with it, because I think for all of us during COVID, can identify with some of these struggles.
Doc, what are some of the signs that we can look out for? I think many athletes might think, hey, I'm an athlete, I have a great career, I've got no reason to be depressed or feel depressed. I don't think I am depressed. But if you're feeling a certain way, what are some of the signs that we can look out for?
Yeah, and that's a great point that you make, is people will go, first the athletes themselves, well, what do I have to be sad about? As you say, I'm an Olympic champion, or, and other people are also looking at you going, well, what do you have to be sad about? You're a professional athlete. And again, it speaks to your previous question. It just makes it that much more difficult to ask for help when you think, well, what do I have to be sad about? And I think this is the education that we need around mental health is, for example, depression is not just sadness. It's something completely different. And I think the signs you say that you have to look out for, number one, we can't just look for performance as the standard of mental health. So, well, you're performing well, so, mentally you're healthy. Things like, for example, if you're just finding that you're losing pleasure in things that you used to find really pleasurable and enjoyable. For athletes in particular, you're just not being motivated when normally they are super motivated. Withdrawing from their support systems. These are all, and that's more depression. Anxiety is that, lots of people might have felt this, the kind of pressure in your chest sometimes, that feeling that you can't catch your breath, racing thoughts. And this is also, of course, not just one day. We all have that sometimes just for a moment in time. It's for, an extended period, like 2-3 weeks. If you're feeling like that, then it's probably time to talk with someone.
And us as spectators, as fans, you know, we're very active. We're people who are very active on social media, and we have a lot to say. And I think sometimes we have a view that, well, you're an athlete, it's part of the job, and we forget that this individual has a passion for that particular sport and not necessarily the limelight. So for the people who have that stance and say, well, you're an athlete, this comes with the job, what do you have to say to those people to be a bit more understanding?
You know, and again, it's a really great insight, that, because I always say, you know, athletes are people first. And I really think that for all of us, as you say, that anyone can have an opinion on, you know, on Twitter or on Instagram. And we saw that with Simone Biles when she came out. I mean, there was an outpouring of support, but there was also, you know, the sector of society that was just like, well, put it together and just keep going. What's wrong with you? And I would really encourage people to say, as much as, yes, athletes, it is their job, they're also human. And if the greatest of all time can feel the pressure, we also have to understand how real that pressure is for athletes. And for all of us, you know, we're not just the profession that we do. We say we're human beings first, we're people first, and we have to make sure that we're taking care of the person, not just the athlete.